A man who dares to waste 1 hour of time has not discovered the value of life. The love for all living creatures is the most noble attribute of man. If I had my life to live over again, I would have made a rule to read some poetry and listen to some music at least once every week. Animals whom we have made our slaves, we do not like to consider our equal. Ignorance more frequently begets confidence than does knowledge. It is those who know little, not those who know much, who so positively assert that this or that problem will never be solved by science. A republic cannot succeed till it contains a certain body of men imbued with the principles of justice and honor. Animals manifestly enjoy excitement and suffer from animal and may exhibit curiosity. But if we were intentionally to neglect the weak and helpless, it could only be for a contingent benefit, with a certain and great present evil. A man's friendships are one of the best measures of his worth. It is not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change. We stopped looking for monsters under our bed when we realized that they were inside us. Man tends to increase at a greater rate than his means of subsistence. Great is the power of steady misrepresentation. My mind seems to have become a kind of machine for grinding general laws out of large collections of facts. Anyone whose disposition leads him to attach more weight to unexplained difficulties than to the explanation of facts will certainly reject my theory. A scientific man ought to have no wishes, no affections, a mere heart of stone. I have called this principle, by which each slight variation, if useful, is preserved, by the term of natural selection. False facts are highly injurious to the progress of science, for they often endure long. I am not apt to follow blindly the lead of other men. The very essence of instinct is that it's followed independently of reason. Man selects only for his own good, nature only for that of the being which he tends. Man is descended from a hairy-tailed quadruped, probably arboreal in its habits. As for a future life, every man must judge for himself between conflicting vague probabilities. If the misery of the poor be caused not by the laws of nature, but by our institutions, great is our sin. An agnostic would be the more correct description of my state of mind. It is not the strongest of the species that survives, not the most intelligent that survives. It is the one that is the most adaptable to change. Man in his arrogance thinks himself a great work, worthy of the interposition of a deity, more humble, and I believe truer, to consider him created from animals. A man's friendships are one of the best measures of his worth. I see no good reasons why the views given in this volume should shock the religious views of anyone. Building a better mousetrap merely results in smarter mice. An American monkey, after getting drunk on brandy, would never touch it again, and thus is much wiser than most men. Intelligence is based on how efficient a species became at doing the things they need to survive. The mystery of the beginning of all things is insoluble by us, and I, for one, must be content to remain an agnostic. My mind seems to have become a kind of machine for grinding general laws out of large collections of facts. So for the shield may be as important for victory as the sword or spear. Puyuanadui. Conscience looks backwards and judges past actions, inducing that kind of dissatisfaction, which if weak we call regret, and if severe, remorse. But then with me, the horrid doubt always arises whether the convictions of man's mind, which has been developed from the mind of the lower animals, are of any value or at all trustworthy. The highest possible stage in moral culture is when we recognize that we ought to control our thoughts. Nothing exists for itself alone, but only in relation to other forms of life. Blushing is the most peculiar and most human of all expressions. To kill an error is as good a service as, and sometimes even better than, the establishing of a new truth or fact. I am not the least afraid to die. It is those who know little, and not those who know much, who so positively assert that this or that problem will never be solved by science. He who remains passive when overwhelmed with grief loses his best chance of recovering his elasticity of mind. I love fool's experiments. I am always making them. Ignorance more frequently begets confidence than does knowledge. One general law leading to the advancement of all organic beings, namely, multiply, vary, let the strongest live, and the weakest die. It is a cursed evil to any man to become as absorbed in any subject as I am in mine. I feel most deeply that the whole subject is too profound for the human intellect. A dog might as well speculate on the mind of Newton. Let each man hope and believe what he can. I have always maintained that excepting fools, men did not differ much in intellect, only in zeal and hard work. And I still think there is an eminently important difference. I have tried lately to read Shakespeare and found it so intolerably dull that it nauseated me. A mathematician is a blind man in a dark room looking for a black cat, which isn't there. In the long history of humankind, and animal kind too, those who learn to collaborate and improvise most effectively have prevailed. On the ordinary view of each species having been independently created, we gain no scientific explanation. We are always slow in admitting any great change of which we do not see the intermediate steps. A surprising number of novels have been read aloud to me, and I like all if moderately good, and if they do not end unhappily, against which a law ought to be passed. We must, however, acknowledge, as it seems to me, that man, with all his noble qualities, still bears in his bodily frame the indelible stamp of his lowly origin. Besides love and sympathy, animals exhibit other qualities connected with the social instincts, which in us would be called moral. We must, however, acknowledge, as it seems to me, that man, with all his noble qualities, still bears in his bodily frame the indelible stamp of his lowly origin. How paramount the future is to the present when one is surrounded by children? Only picture to yourself a nice soft wife on a sofa with good fire and books and music. I am like a gambler and love a wild experiment. In conclusion, it appears that nothing can be more improving to a young naturalist than a journey in distant countries.